After years apart, Noah and Kai began to let their walls fall. On the shore of Eden, truths were spoken that had been buried since prom night. Two of them had found each other again, not just in memory, but in present, where laughter and longing finally met. But Eden is a place where tides shift quickly, and love is never free from its weight. In this chapter, Noah brings Kai into the heart of his family, to the Sunday brunch at the clubhouse. What waits there is silence, but also a warmth they never expected. And as whispers spread through town, they'll find old faces from their past, and a question that may decide the course of their future. This is Salt in Our Veins, Chapter 5, The Fall We Couldn't Stop. The mirror above the porcelain sink caught them both, side by side, as though the years had folded and left them standing there, the way they always should have been. The hum of the clubhouse drifted through the tiled walls, clinking glasses, muffled laughter. But here in the bathroom, it was only the two of them, breeze fogging faintly in the cool air. Kai gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles pale. His shirt felt too stiff, his collar pulling at his neck, every part of him screaming that he didn't belong here. He tried not to meet his own reflection, but Noah's was impossible to ignore. Calm, steady, his presence filling the space like a tide rising beneath him. "Breeze," Noah murmured, leaning just close enough that his shoulder brushed. His hand reached up, smoothing the collar that Kai had tucked half loose. With a small grin, he straightened it. Kai's chest tightened, but not from nerves this time. Their eyes met in the glass, hesitation giving way to something braver. Noah leaned in, slow enough for Kai to stop him, but Kai didn't. Their lips touched, soft and certain, the kind of kiss that said more than words could carry. Not desperate, not stolen, just right. When Noah pulled back, his hand lingered, fingers sliding into Kai's hair. He smoothed it back gently. "Better," he said softly, as if the small touch had fixed more than just Kai's hair. Kai let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The reflection staring back at him still looked like the same man, warm by sea and silence. But under Noah's touch, he felt different, lighter, anchored. They stepped out together into the corridor, the murmur of Sunday voices growing louder with each stride. The double doors opened onto the dining hall, and the tide of the town's gaze lifted toward them. And at the far end of the room, Noah's mother was already rising from her seat. The clink of silverware softened as the two of them crossed the dining hall. Some heads turned, whispering curling like smoke at the edge of tables. But the sound of it dulled under the swell of piano notes drifting from the far corner. For Kai, every step felt heavier, as if the floor itself demanded proof of his place here. And then Noah's mother was there, arms outstretched, her smile pulling the air into something lighter. She kissed Noah's cheek, then turned to Kai as though he'd always been part of her family. "Kai," she said, voice warm, deliberate. "It's about time you came with him. Sit. Come on, sit." Her hand lingered on his arm just long enough to steady him before she guided them toward the table set neatly with linen and china. Noah's father sat at the head, his posture firm, shoulders squared as if the seat itself was an anchor. His knife rested perfectly aligned with his fork, untouched since their arrival. Kai lowered himself into the chair opposite Noah's father, every muscle braced for the weight of silence. Noah sat close enough that their knees brushed beneath the table, the small touch grounding him, reminding him he wasn't alone. The food arrived in courses, plates of eggs and ham, basket of rolls, bowls of fruit. Noah's mother kept the current of conversation moving, her voice like water smoothing stone. She asked about Kai's work on the boats, about the long hours on deck, the stubborn ropes, the roughness of the nets. Kai answered in short bursts at first, but her listening was patient, and Noah's quiet grin encouraged him forward. Soon his voice found its rhythm, rough but certain, filling spaces he never thought he was allowed to occupy. Noah's father didn't speak. He carved through his bacon with slow precision, eyes drifting often to the tall window where the tide shimmered in the distance. His silence pressed like a tide against Kai's chest. But it wasn't the sharpness of judgment. It was something harder to name, a waiting, unmeasuring. Kai shifted, fingers curling beneath the table, but Noah's hand brushed his, steady and warm, as if to say, "You belong here." The piano swelled softly in the background. The voices of the dining hall rose and fell, and at their table, for the first time, Kai let himself breathe. When the last plates had been cleared and the hall had begun to thin, Noah leaned close, his breast warm against Kai's ear. "Come on," he murmured, nodding toward the wide glass door that opened onto the veranda. Kai hesitated, the murmur of voices still pressing at his back, but Noah's hand found his and pulled gently. Together they stepped outside into the light. The veranda stretched wide above the sea, the wooden boards sun-warmed beneath their feet. Seagulls circled the harbor. The air smelled of salt and citrus carried from the kitchen, and for the first time that morning, the weight inside Kai's chest loosened. He gripped the railing, looking out at the tide. "Didn't think it could feel like this," he admitted, his voice raw. Noah leaned beside him, shoulder brushing his. "It was never Eden holding you out," he said softly. "It was us." The truth of it settled between them, undeniable as the horizon. Kai turned. The sun lay catching the sharp line of Noah's jaw, and before doubt could rise, he closed the distance. Their lips met, gently at first, then certain, steady. Not stolen, not hidden. A kiss that belonged to daylight. And when they parted, a figure stood at the doorway. Noah's father. Kai froze, blood draining from his face. The old man's eyes were fixed on them, unreadable, his hand resting lightly against the doorframe. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then he stepped forward, slow, deliberate. His gaze moved between them, then settled on Kai. For a heartbeat, the weight of years seems to press down the space between them. "About time," he said at last. His voice low but steady, he placed a hand on Kai's shoulder. "Don't waste another." And with that, he turned back inside, leaving them on the veranda. Kai's eyes burned as he watched the door swing shut behind Noah's father. The weight of those few words, simple, steady, almost impossibly kind, still pressed against his chest. For years he had braced for anger, for rejection, and instead he was left with this, a blessing that felt too fragile to touch. Noah leaned against the railing, a small smile tugging at his mouth, but Kai's mind was still racing. He turned toward him, voice low, uncertain. "Have you told them?" Kai asked. "Why you really came back?" Noah's smile faltered. He looked out at the tide, waves breaking soft against rocks below. "Not yet." "What will you say?" Noah shook his head, the breeze lifting a strand of his hair across his brow. His voice was quiet, almost lost in the sea's murmur. "I don't know." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was honest, the kind of silence that admitted how much still lingered between them. Kai reached for the railing, his hand brushing Noah's until their fingers caught. The tide whispered on, steady as ever, as though reminding them that not every truth had to be spoken at once. They stepped back into the dining hall. Most of the room had thinned now, servers clearing plates, the piano softening into something almost lullaby. Noah's mother gestured for them to sit again, her smile unchanged. "Stay a little longer," she urged. "There's no rush." But Kai shook his head, his chair still tucked neatly beneath the table. "Thank you truly. But I think—" His eyes flicked to Noah, then back to his parents. "I think Noah has something to share, and it should be family time." Noah's brow furrowed, caught off guard, but Kai only offered a small, steady smile. He placed a hand briefly on Noah's shoulder, then stepped back. "I'll see you tomorrow afternoon." Kai turned toward the door, the murmur of voices soft behind him. Before he stepped out, he glanced back once. At the table, Noah sat forward, his hands fidgeting against the linen. His mother reached across, folding her fingers over his, steadying him. His father leaned back, silent but present, eyes fixed on his son with the weight that was no longer unreadable. From the doorway, it was only a picture. 3 figures framed by tall windows, the sea bright behind them. The words were lost to the hum of the hall, but the shape of them carried enough. Kai stepped into the corridor, letting the door ease shut behind him. For the first time, he felt the story no longer rested on his shoulders alone. By Monday, the tide of whispers had reached each corner of Eden, and news traveled quicker than the seagulls. At the docks, old men coiling their ropes spoke low, their eyes flicking toward Kai as he passed. By the time Noah stepped into the street beside him, the murmurs had braided into something larger. Kai felt the looks on his back like the weight of a net. But he didn't shrink from them. Not this time. Noah's shoulder brushed his as they walked, steady and unflinching. And the simple act of being seen together became its own kind of defiance. Kai exhaled, shaking his head. "Well, guess that answers the question if people noticed." "They always noticed," Noah said, half smiling. Then his expression sobered as Kai looked at him. "And yesterday?" Kai asked quietly. "With your family after I left. Did they take it well?" For a moment Noah didn't answer, his gaze tracing the cobblestones ahead. Then he nodded, the memory flicking across his face. "Better than I thought. Mom held my hand the whole time. Dad just listened." Kai's chest eased at that, the knot of worry loosening. "Good," he said softly. "That's good." The words lingered between them, carrying more weight than either admitted. And just as the silence began to stretch, a voice cut through the afternoon air. "Noah?" Someone called, bright and familiar. They turned and saw Hannah.
"Hannah? God, it's been forever." She came toward them with a stroller, and the toddler clinging to her side, her smile unchanged from the girl they remembered. Noah returned, eyes dropping to the children. "These your boys?" Hannah laughed, brushing a strand of her hair from her face. "Yeah. Keep me running every hour of the day." Adjusting the toddler's grip on her hand before looking back up to them both. For a moment, they all stood there, the children restless but grounding the scene. Kai found his eyes drawn to them, something about their innocence softening the edge of the day. But Noah only let out a faint groan of disbelief. "God, everyone knows already, don't they?" Hannah's grin turned knowing. "Of course they do. And you'll be glad to hear it's a good thing. People saying you two belong together, that it looks right." The words hung in the air. Kai blinked, unprepared for the kindness beneath them. Hannah's voice softened. And between us, Maddie and I always knew. Back then, we told each other, just wonder when you'd stop pretending. Noah let out a half laugh, shaking his hand. That sounds like Maddie. Still abroad, Hannah said, answering the unspoken question. We don't speak much, but you know her. She's probably stirring things up somewhere. She was never meant to stay put. Her children tugged again, one whining. Anyway, it's good. Really good to see you both like this. Noah stood frozen a moment, caught between disbelief and relief. While Kai let out a long breath, eyes still lingering where the children had been. The whispers of Eden didn't feel sharp. They felt like a tide turning, carrying them forward. The sky carried that slow burn gold of evening. Kai and Noah walked side by side, their steps unhurried, the weight of Hannah's words still lingering. Kai's mind replayed the sight of her children, as though they have rebuilt a future he wasn't sure he was brave enough to picture. Beside him, Noah carried himself differently, shoulders lifted, gaze restless. There was the look of someone seen too clearly, and still trying to decide what to do with it. A few younger deckhands were already on the docks, hauling ropes, their laughter rising over the water. Kai slowed, watching them. Training starts soon, he said. Noah's eye followed the boys on the pier. He gave a small crooked grin. Guess that means me too, huh? Kai smirked faintly, though his voice carried a weight beneath it. You'll need to get back into shape. The sea doesn't care about excuses. The banter hung between them, warm and familiar. But there was something else in Noah's smile, something restless, something unspoken. Before Kai could read it, the sharp buzz of a phone shattered the quiet. Noah pulled it from his pocket, the glow of screen catching in his eyes. He froze, then stepped a pace away. I should take this. Kai stayed where he was, suddenly alone. His eyes drifted back to the harbor, the sails, the ropes, the boys running drills in the fading light. This was the rhythm of Eden, the one he'd lived and breathed for years. It bound him, it broke him, it kept him alive. And now with Noah a few paces away, it felt as though the whole town was holding its breath, waiting to see if he would stay bound to it, or let it go. When Noah finally ended the call, he didn't come straight back. He stood a moment longer, the phone heavy in his hand, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the water. Kai shifted, unwilling to just stand in the quiet. He glanced toward the water, then called out lightly, I was thinking we start early tomorrow. Get the drills in before the boys have time to complain. Noah moved, slowly, deliberately. He slipped the phone into his pocket and crossed the space between them. His steps were heavy, as if the call itself weighted him down. Kai's smirk faded as Noah stopped in front of him. The silence pressed close, thicker now, until Noah's voice finally broke it. Kai, I got an offer. Kai looked away, eyes fixed on the sail tugging wristlets against their ropes. Noah continued. It's Sydney. Noah searched Kai's face, then stepped closer. Voice low and raw. If I asked, he swallowed, the sound thick in his throat. Would you go with me? The sail snapped overhead, seagulls wheeling against the fading sky. Kai stood frozen, and that was how the day closed, suspended, the answer unspoken, waiting like a sail in windless air.
And that's where tonight's chapter ends. From family brunch to whispers in town, Noah and Kai finally began to stand openly together. Even old friends saw what had always been there. But just when Eden started to feel like home, A phone call changed everything. An offer, a future, Sydney. And one question left hanging in the salt-heavy air. If Noah asked, would Kai go with him? You've been listening to Salt in Our Veins, Chapter 5, The Fall We Couldn't Stop. Next time, the story of Salt in Our Veins reaches its final chapter, the choice, the answer, and the promise that will define their lives. Don't miss it. If this journey has moved you, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. What would you choose, Eden or Sydney? And subscribe so you'll be here for the finale. The last chapter is coming, and you won't want to miss it.